Avery was carefully preparing for a colleague's birthday party, taking her time to apply her makeup with precision and choosing her favorite dress. She felt satisfied with how she looked as she glanced at herself in the mirror, the soft glow of the light reflecting off her skin. As she was about to leave, she casually mentioned to Ethan, who was sitting on the sofa, "I'm going to a colleague's birthday party tonight. Don't wait up for me. I might be late." Ethan, who had been watching her in silence, couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that had settled in him. His gaze followed her movements as she finished adjusting her outfit, and he tried to steady his voice as he spoke. "You've been going out a lot lately," he said, the words feeling heavier than he intended. "I can't shake the feeling that something's off whenever you go out." His concern was evident, but his tone was steady, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Avery paused as she adjusted the strap of her heels, her eyes never meeting his. She offered a reassuring smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry so much," she replied softly, her voice quieter than usual. "It's just a party with friends. Nothing big." Ethan didn't seem convinced. His discomfort deepened, and he stood up from the sofa, unable to shake the growing sense that something wasn't right. "It's not just about tonight, though," he continued, trying to keep his emotions in check. "You've been going out often without really telling me where you're going or who you're with. It feels like you're hiding something." Avery hesitated for a moment, her fingers playing nervously with the strap of her purse. She turned her head slightly, but didn't look at him directly. "I just want to go out and have fun, Ethan," she said, her voice sounding defensive. "Don't make it a big deal." But Ethan's frustration was beginning to spill over. "Avery, it's not just about fun," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "It's about us. I feel like we're drifting apart. Every time you leave, it feels like you're choosing something else over our marriage." Avery glanced toward the door, the pressure of the conversation building inside her. She felt cornered, unsure how to respond. She wanted to end the discussion before it escalated. "I don't want to argue, Ethan," she said, her hand resting on the door handle. "It's just a party." Her voice was calmer, but it carried an edge of finality. But Ethan was not finished. His voice dropped low, steady but full of emotion. "If you leave tonight, don't come back," he said, the words hanging in the air between them like a heavy weight. "We're done." Avery froze, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to go that far. Shock washed over her as she turned to face him, her expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the words trembling as they left her lips. Ethan's face was a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I've been trying to hold on, but I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice thick with pain. "If you leave tonight, then don't bother coming back. We're done." Avery stood there, torn between anger and disbelief, her mind racing. The silence between them seemed to stretch out longer than it should, and her heart ached as the reality of his words sank in. She couldn't bear to stay and talk it through, not now. She sighed deeply, feeling a weight in her chest, and whispered, "I'm going. We'll talk later." Without waiting for a response, she walked out the door, the sound of it closing softly behind her. Ethan stood motionless, staring at the empty space she left, his heart sinking under the weight of the ultimatum he had given her. An hour passed after Avery left, the house eerily quiet. Ethan sat on the couch, still processing the conversation and the pain that lingered in his chest. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. He picked it up, reading a message from one of his friends. "I just saw Avery walking down the street with some guy. Is everything okay between you two?" Ethan's stomach dropped as a cold wave of realization hit him. The suspicions that had been gnawing at him for weeks now felt confirmed. He couldn't decide which thought hurt more, the image of Avery with another man, or the crushing awareness that his marriage was crumbling. He sat there, stunned, as memories of better times with Avery flooded his mind. He thought of the quiet evenings they used to share, the laughter, the trust. But now, all of it seemed like distant memories, fading with every passing day. Something had shifted between them, but he couldn't fully grasp what had changed or how far things had deteriorated. The following morning, Avery returned home. She walked in as though nothing had happened, her makeup slightly smudged, betraying the late-night activities she had been involved in. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The silence between them spoke volumes. Avery seemed unaffected by the events of the night before, her casual demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was feeling inside. She glanced at him briefly, not meeting his gaze, and went about her routine as if nothing had changed. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had irrevocably shifted, but he didn't know how to address it. The distance between them was palpable, and it seemed like their relationship was slipping through his fingers, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. Ethan sat at the table, sipping his coffee in silence, his eyes fixed on Avery as she moved about the room. The air between them was thick with tension, and although Avery could feel it, she chose to ignore it. She focused on preparing for work, trying to act as though everything was normal. She casually greeted Ethan, hoping the awkwardness would dissipate and the heavy atmosphere would lift. However, deep down, she could sense that something was deeply wrong. What Avery didn't know was that Ethan had already made a decision, one that would change everything. Later that day, without saying a word to her, Ethan began to pack his belongings. He moved with quiet determination, folding his clothes methodically and placing them into a suitcase. He felt numb, but his resolve was firm. He could no longer stay in a marriage filled with lies and deceit. It was over. When Avery returned home from work that evening, she immediately noticed how eerily empty the house felt. A wave of panic swept over her as she saw that Ethan's side of the closet was completely cleared out. She rushed through the house, opening drawers that were now bare, her heart sinking with every discovery. A sense of dread filled her as she realized that Ethan had left, without a word, without an explanation. Desperate, she grabbed her phone and dialed his number, hoping for some kind of reassurance or an explanation. When Ethan answered, his voice was distant and detached. "Avery," he said calmly, "I've seen the signs. You've been lying to me for a while now, and I can't live like this anymore." Avery's throat tightened at his words. She wanted to explain, to tell him that she didn't mean for things to get this bad, but before she could speak, Ethan interrupted her. His tone was firm, resolute. "It's over, Avery. This marriage is over." He hung up before she could respond, leaving her in stunned silence. Her hands trembled as the weight of his words sank in, and the realization of everything she had done crashed down upon her. She was alone, her marriage destroyed by her own actions. There was no going back. In the days that followed, Ethan moved out of the city, seeking solace and a fresh start far away from the painful memories of his failed marriage. As time went on, he met a woman named Lily, who brought joy and stability back into his life. Together, they began to build a new relationship, one rooted in trust, something Ethan had thought was lost forever. Meanwhile, Avery's life began to spiral downward. She tried to fill the void left by Ethan with parties and attention from other men, but everything felt hollow. No matter what she did, she couldn't escape the overwhelming emptiness she felt. She realized too late that she had lost the one person who truly cared for her. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her selfishness, her lies, and her inability to appreciate Ethan until it was too late had cost her everything. Now, she was left to face the consequences of her actions alone, with nothing but regret and loneliness. A year later, Ethan and Lily were engaged, finally embracing the happiness he deserved. He had found someone who valued him, someone who could offer the kind of relationship based on honesty, love, and mutual respect that he had once hoped for in his marriage with Avery. On the other hand, Avery remained stuck in a cycle of regret, isolated and desolate. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had ruined her chance at true happiness. Avery's story became a painful reminder of the consequences of betraying someone's trust. It taught her, too late, that a relationship built on lies could not survive. In contrast, Ethan's decision to leave, though painful, was ultimately the right one. It allowed him to heal and find the love and trust he deserved. Avery, however, was left to confront the reality of what she had thrown away, learning the hard way that relationships must be cherished before they slip away.